Sometimes the cause of tragedy is not mechanical or human error, but simple misfortune. In 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123 suffered a rear pressure bulkhead failure that crippled its tail and destroyed its hydraulic systems. The crew fought for control for more than 30 minutes, performing an extraordinary display of skill. But the damage was too severe. The crash claimed over 500 lives. The investigation found that a faulty repair years earlier had weakened the structure. That discovery forced manufacturers and airlines to overhaul maintenance procedures, ensuring that every repair, no matter how small, would be documented and inspected with precision. And then came the mystery that captivated the entire world. In March 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanished from radar. It was a modern Boeing 777 flying through clear skies. One moment it was there, the next, gone. The search covered millions of square miles of ocean. Fragments of debris washed up years later, but the main wreckage was never found. The disappearance left behind endless theories, but more importantly, it exposed a weakness in global tracking systems. In response, new international regulations were introduced to ensure that every aircraft can be located anywhere on Earth in real time. Today, no airliner can simply vanish without a trace. Even from tragedy, technology and policy evolved to make the skies safer. Yet aviation is not just a story of what S lost. It's also a story of survival. On a freezing January morning in 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 departed New York's LaGuardia Airport. Just after takeoff, a flock of geese struck both engines, shutting them down completely. The aircraft began to lose altitude rapidly over the city. Captain Chesley "Sully" Sullenberger and his first officer Jeff Skiles had seconds to act. With no power and no runway within reach, Sully made a bold decision. He would land on the Hudson River. The world watched as the Airbus A320 descended gracefully between buildings and bridges, touching down on the icy water. Passengers evacuated onto the wings, rescue boats raced toward them, and within minutes, all 155 people were safe. It became known as the Miracle on the Hudson. But for Sully, it wasn't luck. It was training, teamwork, and composure under pressure. His actions reminded the world that preparation turns the impossible into the achievable. Behind every investigation, there are people who dedicate their lives to understanding what went wrong so that others will never face the same fate. Investigators, engineers, and scientists study the black boxes, the flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders that capture the final moments of every flight. They analyze numbers, sounds, and fragments of evidence to tell the story that the sky cannot. Their work has led to countless innovations, stronger materials, smarter warning systems, and new ways to train pilots. Each improvement in safety was written by the lessons of loss. Today, air travel is statistically the safest form of transportation on Earth. The odds of a fatal accident are less than 1 in several million flights. This safety record wasn't achieved through luck or technology alone. It came from the willingness to learn, to question, and to never repeat mistakes. Every procedure, every checklist, every line spoken in a cockpit carries the weight of history. Pilots are trained to respect that history, to know that safety is built not by avoiding failure, but by learning from it. Yet the human element remains central. Machines may guide the way, but people still make the decisions. Weather changes, systems fail, and unexpected events unfold. In those moments, what matters most is judgment, communication, and calm. The sky tests every weakness, but it also reveals every strength. Each of these stories, from Tenerife's fog to the mystery of Flight 370, forms a chapter in the evolution of flight. Together, they transformed aviation from a field once ruled by instinct into one governed by precision, cooperation, and respect for procedure. The men and women who faced those moments of crisis didn't just experience tragedy. They became part of a legacy that continues to protect millions. When a pilot sits in the cockpit today, they are surrounded by reminders of the past. The language they use with air traffic control was shaped by Tenerife. The emergency checklists they memorize were inspired by Sioux City. The stall recovery training they practice was born from Flight 447. The flight tracking system that monitors their route was designed after MH370. Every improvement, every regulation, every redundant wire and sensor tells a silent story of lessons paid for in human courage. The sky. Humanity's oldest dream, and one of its greatest achievements. Every day, thousands of aircraft rise into the air, crossing oceans, deserts, and continents. Millions of people place their trust in machines of steel and technology, and in the men and women who guide them through the clouds. For most flights, the journey begins and ends in comfort. But for a few, the story takes an unexpected turn. When things go wrong in the air, every second, every voice, every decision can mean the difference between disaster and survival. It was a quiet Sunday on the island of Tenerife, off the coast of Spain, when two Boeing 747s were forced to land at a small airport called Los Rodeos. A terrorist bomb at another airport diverted traffic there, turning the small airfield into a maze of waiting aircraft. As fog rolled in, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Inside one cockpit sat the captain of KLM Flight 4805, one of the most respected pilots in the company. In another, the crew of Pan Am Flight 1736 waited for instructions to taxi. Radio frequencies were crowded, messages overlapped, and accents blurred. In the confusion, one tragic misunderstanding took shape. Believing he had clearance to take off, the KLM captain pushed the throttles forward. Down the same runway, the Pan Am jet was still turning to exit. Through the dense fog, neither crew could see the other until it was too late. What followed was the deadliest accident in aviation history. From the wreckage of Tenerife came one of aviation's most important lessons. Investigators discovered that the cause wasn't a single mistake, but a chain of them: miscommunication, pressure, and assumptions. Out of that realization was born crew resource management, a revolutionary change in how pilots operate. From then on, authority in the cockpit was balanced with teamwork. First officers were encouraged to question, to verify, to challenge. Every word on the radio was standardized to remove confusion. The changes that followed made flying safer for every person who would ever step on a plane again. Years later, a very different flight faced a different kind of crisis. United Airlines Flight 232 was cruising high above Iowa when a loud explosion shattered the calm. A fan blade inside the tail engine had disintegrated, cutting through all three hydraulic systems that controlled the aircraft. In an instant, the pilots lost nearly every means of control. No rudder, no flaps, no stabilizer. The massive DC-10 was flying blind. Yet the crew refused to give in. Captain Al Haynes and his team discovered they could steer using only the remaining engines. Together with a training captain who happened to be on board, they guided the crippled jet toward Sioux City. The landing was chaotic. The aircraft broke apart, but because of their skill and teamwork, 184 lives were saved. The investigation later called it a miracle of airmanship, and it forever changed how pilots train for total system failures. Another story came from the darkness of the South Atlantic. In June 2009, Air France Flight 447 left Rio de Janeiro for Paris. The aircraft was modern, equipped with the latest flight computers and automation. But as it entered a region of towering storm clouds, ice crystals began to form in its airspeed sensors, known as pitot tubes. Suddenly, the autopilot disconnected. The cockpit filled with alarms, lights, and conflicting data. In those tense moments, confusion overcame training. The pilots believed they were overspeeding and pulled the nose up, when in fact, the aircraft was stalling. For minutes, the jet climbed and fell through the night sky until it disappeared into the ocean. It took 2 years to find the wreckage. The data recovered revealed that over-reliance on automation and a lack of manual flying experience had turned a small malfunction into a tragedy. The result was a worldwide transformation in pilot education. Airlines reintroduced manual flight training and taught pilots to understand not just the computers, but the physics of flight itself. Flight has always been a symbol of hope, of reaching beyond the limits of Earth. It's a reminder that even after the darkest moments, humanity continues to rise. The men and women who step into the air each day do so not with fear, but with faith in the knowledge that every tragedy has taught us something valuable. They know that safety isn't an illusion, it's a promise built on constant learning. So when the next aircraft lifts off, engines roaring and wings trembling against the wind, it carries with it more than passengers. It carries the memory of those who flew before, the scientists who investigated, the engineers who redesigned, and the families who turned loss into purpose. The sky is safer today because we refuse to look away from what went wrong. Every sound in the cockpit, every communication, every switch is part of a system designed to prevent the smallest mistake from becoming the next tragedy. And still, pilots know that the ultimate safeguard is not the computer or the machine. It's the human being sitting behind the controls. Flight will always be an act of courage. The sky will never promise certainty, but it will always reward those who face it with respect and discipline. Every time a jet takes off, it proves that we learned from the times we fell, and as long as people continue to look to the heavens and dream of flight, we will keep improving, keep learning, and keep honoring those who made that dream safer for everyone. Because in the end, this is not just about what went wrong. It is about how we made it right. Every journey that begins on a runway carries a history written in resilience. Every takeoff is a quiet tribute to the past. Every safe landing is proof that even when flight goes wrong, humanity always finds a way to rise again.